The March wind cut through downtown Philadelphia like a knife, carrying the last bitter breath of winter across the intersection where Sarah Williams stood with her 18-month-old twins strapped to her chest in a worn baby carrier. In her cold, numbed hands, she held a basket of flowers, daisies, carnations, and roses she'd bought wholesale that morning with the last of her money, hoping to sell them to commuters heading home from work. Emma and Ethan, her blonde-haired twins, pressed against her for warmth, their small faces red from the cold, their eyes heavy with the exhaustion that came from spending hours outside in weather no toddler should be exposed to. Sarah had dressed them in every piece of warm clothing they owned, layering their small bodies until they could barely move. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. "Flowers! Fresh flowers!" Sarah called out, her voice hoarse from hours of shouting over traffic noise. $5 a bunch! Beautiful flowers! Commuters hurried past without making eye contact, their own lives too busy, their own problems too consuming to notice. The young woman with 2 babies, selling flowers in the cold. Some glanced at her with pity, others with judgment, making assumptions about her choices, her circumstances, her worthiness of help. Sarah was 24 years old, though she looked older, worn down by 2 years of single parenthood, poverty, and the constant grind of trying to survive. She'd been a college student once, studying nursing, planning a future. Then she'd gotten pregnant, and her boyfriend, the twins' father, had disappeared the moment he'd heard the news. Her parents, religious conservatives who'd made their expectations clear, had disowned her for getting pregnant out of wedlock. So Sarah had done what she had to do. She'd dropped out of school. She'd worked whatever jobs would hire a visibly pregnant woman. She'd given birth to twins in a charity hospital, alone except for a kind nurse who'd held her hand through the worst of it, and she'd been fighting to keep her head above water ever since. Daycare for twins cost more than she could earn at minimum wage jobs. The waiting list for subsidized childcare was 2 years long. Family support didn't exist. Government assistance covered some expenses, but never enough, and the bureaucracy was a nightmare to navigate while caring for 2 infants. So Sarah had gotten creative. She'd learned she could buy flowers wholesale and sell them at intersections during rush hour. On a good day, she could make $50 or $60, enough for diapers, formula, the cheapest groceries. On bad days, she made nothing and went home to their tiny studio. Apartment with unsold flowers wilting in her, basket and no money for dinner. Today was shaping up to be a bad day. She'd been out here for 3 hours and had sold exactly 2 bunches of flowers. $10. Not even enough to cover what she'd paid for the flowers wholesale, let alone feed her children. Emma started crying, a tired, hungry, cold cry that broke Sarah's heart. Ethan joined in, his small voice creating a chorus of misery that made passing commuters walk even faster, eager to escape the uncomfortable reminder of suffering. "Shh, babies, it's okay," Sarah murmured, bouncing slightly to soothe them. "We'll go home soon, just a little longer. Mama needs to sell a few more flowers and then we'll go somewhere warm." But the twins were past the point where bouncing and reassurance helped. They were cold and hungry and done with being outside. Their crying escalated and Sarah felt tears burning her own eyes. She was failing them. Every day, in 100 different ways, she was failing her children. A car horn made her jump. She'd unconsciously drifted too close to the curb, and a driver was gesturing angrily at her to move. Sarah stepped back, murmuring an apology the driver couldn't hear, clutching her flower basket tighter. That's when the black Mercedes pulled up to the curb directly in front of her and stopped. The car was the kind Sarah had only seen in magazines. Sleek, expensive, probably worth more than she'd earn in 5 years. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a man in his early 40s. Handsome in that polished way wealthy people often were, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. He was looking directly at her with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. Not pity exactly, but something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. "How much for all the flowers?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly despite the traffic noise. Sarah blinked, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry?" "All of them. Every flower in your basket." "How much?" Sarah looked down at her basket. She had at least 15 bunches left. At $5 each, that would be $75, more than she'd hoped to make all day. $75, she said hesitantly, waiting for him to laugh or drive away or reveal that this was some kind of cruel joke. Instead, he reached for his wallet and pulled out $100 bill. Keep the change, but I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes. Would you get in the car where it's warm? You and your babies look frozen. Every instinct Sarah had screamed that getting into a stranger's car was dangerous. But she looked at her twins. Emma's face was blotchy from crying. Ethan's lips looked almost blue despite his layers of clothing, and she made a decision. They needed warmth, even if just for a few minutes. Okay, she said quietly. The man got out of the car and came around to help her. Up close, Sarah could see he was older than she'd initially thought, probably mid-40s, with brown hair graying at the temples and kind eyes that held their own shadows of pain. I'm Michael Preston, he said, opening the back door. Let me help you with the babies. The name meant nothing to Sarah, but the way he carefully helped her maneuver the twins into the back seat suggested he'd done this before. The car's interior was blissfully warm, heated leather seats providing instant relief from the bitter wind. Michael returned to the driver's seat and turned to face her. My name is Michael Preston. I run Preston Holdings. We own real estate developments, some technology companies, various investments. I tell you this not to brag, but so you understand that I have resources and I'd like to help you. Sarah clutched her empty flower basket defensively. I don't want charity. I'm not offering charity, Michael said gently. I'm offering opportunity. But first, I'd like to hear your story. What's your name? And how did you end up selling flowers in the cold? With 2 babies strapped to your chest? Something in his tone, not judgment, not pity, but genuine interest, made Sarah's careful walls crack. And once she started talking, the story poured out. She told him about college, about the nursing program she'd loved, about getting pregnant and being abandoned by her boyfriend and disowned by her family, about trying to work while caring for twins, about the impossibility of affording childcare, about the bureaucratic nightmares of social services and the humiliation of food banks and the constant calculation of whether to buy diapers or groceries. I'm not lazy, Sarah said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. I work so hard, but it's never enough. The system is designed for failure. If I get a job that pays better, I lose assistance. If I work full-time, childcare costs more than I earn. If I go back to school, I can't work enough hours to pay rent. Every door I try leads nowhere, and meanwhile, my babies are suffering because I can't give them what they need. Michael listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as Sarah talked. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. 22 years ago, he finally said, I was standing on a street corner not far from here. Not with babies, but with a cardboard sign asking for help. I'd lost everything, my job, my apartment, my savings. I was 3 days from becoming completely homeless. Sarah stared at him, unable to reconcile this wealthy man in his expensive car with the image of homelessness. A woman stopped her car and offered me a job, Michael continued. Not charity, a job. She owned a cleaning company and needed someone to clean office buildings at night. It was minimum wage, hard work, and I was overqualified. I had an MBA, for God's sake. But I took it because I needed to survive. He paused. That woman was named Dorothy Chen. She didn't just give me a job. She mentored me. She introduced me to people in her network. She encouraged me to start my own business. She lent me seed money when I had a promising idea. And when I succeeded, she refused repayment. She said, pass it forward. When you see someone struggling the way you struggled, help them the way I helped you. Where is she now? Sarah asked softly. She died 5 years ago, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. Cancer. But before she died, she made me promise to honor our agreement, to pass it forward. I've tried to do that through various foundations and programs, but honestly, those feel impersonal. This, meeting someone directly, helping in a way that's immediate and meaningful, this is what Dorothy would have wanted. He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to Sarah. Here's what I'm proposing. Preston Holdings has an on-site daycare center for employees' children. It's subsidized, high quality, and there are currently openings. I can get your twins enrolled immediately. Sarah's breath caught. I can't afford daycare. You're not listening, Michael said with a slight smile. I said subsidized. You'd pay on a sliding scale based on income. For someone in your situation, it would be essentially free until you're earning enough to contribute. But I'm not an employee, Sarah protested. Not yet, Michael agreed. But you were studying nursing, correct? We have a medical clinic on site that serves our employees. It's run by a nurse practitioner who's been telling me for months that she needs an assistant. The position requires someone to schedule appointments, handle basic first aid, keep records, stock supplies. It doesn't require a nursing degree, just someone smart, reliable, and interested in healthcare. Sarah felt hope rising, dangerous and intoxicating. Why would you do this for me? You don't know me. I know enough, Michael said. I know you're standing in the cold selling flowers instead of begging. I know you're dressed poorly, but your children are bundled in every warm thing you own. I know you're exhausted but still trying. That tells me you're exactly the kind of person Dorothy saw in me, someone who just needs an opportunity, not charity. What if I fail? Sarah whispered. What if I'm not good enough? Then we'll figure it out, Michael said simply. The point isn't perfection. The point is opportunity. The chance to work, to support your children, to eventually go back to school if that's what you want, to build a life instead of just surviving day to day. Emma and Ethan had fallen asleep in Sarah's arms, finally warm and peaceful. Sarah looked down at them, these two small people who depended entirely on her, who deserved so much more than she'd been able to give them. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll take the job. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, Michael said with a smile. Wait until you've worked for us for a while and realized how demanding we can be. But Sarah, I believe you're going to do great things. All you needed was a chance. The next morning, Sarah showed up at Preston Holdings with her twins, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. The building was modern and gleaming, so different from the rundown places she'd lived and worked. The daycare center was bright and cheerful, staffed by professionals who welcomed Emma and Ethan with warmth and expertise. The job itself was exactly as Michael had described, challenging but not overwhelming, important but with room for learning. Rachel, the nurse practitioner, was patient with Sarah's questions and impressed by her medical knowledge retained from her nursing studies. You're overqualified for this position, Rachel observed after the first week. Have you thought about finishing your degree? I can't afford to go back to school, Sarah said automatically. Preston Holdings has a tuition assistance program, Rachel replied. Employees who've been with us for 6 months can apply. It covers up to full tuition for degree programs related to their work. You're in healthcare. Nursing definitely qualifies. Sarah felt tears threatening. Every door she'd thought was closed seemed to be opening, one after another, revealing possibilities she'd stopped letting herself imagine. Over the following months, Sarah rebuilt her life. She enrolled in night classes at a community college, working toward her nursing degree. Emma and Ethan thrived in daycare, hitting developmental milestones Sarah had worried they'd miss because of their difficult start. She moved out of the studio apartment into a small 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood. She started saving money, actually saving, building an emergency fund instead of living crisis to crisis. Michael checked in periodically. Not as a boss. He wasn't directly her supervisor, but as a mentor. He'd ask about her classes, her children, her plans. He'd offer advice when she struggled and encouragement when she succeeded. You're doing this, he'd tell her. Not me. I just opened the door. You're the one who walked through it and did the work. But Sarah knew better. Yes, she was working hard. Yes, she was making good choices. But none of it would have been possible without that moment when Michael stopped his car, bought her flowers, and offered her a chance. 2 years after that cold March day, Sarah graduated with her nursing degree. She'd been offered a full-time position in the Preston Holdings medical clinic with benefits, good pay, and a schedule that allowed her to be present for Emma and Ethan. Her twins were 3 now, happy and healthy and thriving. At her graduation ceremony, Michael was there in the audience beside Rachel and several other colleagues from Preston Holdings. After the ceremony, he pulled Sarah aside. Dorothy would be proud, he said simply. And so am I. You've worked incredibly hard to get here. I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah said. Michael, you saved us. My children would have had such a different, harder life if you hadn't stopped that day. Or you would have found another way, Michael replied. Because that's who you are, someone who survives, who persists, who fights for her children. I just made the fighting a little less impossible." He paused. "I need to tell you something. That day I stopped my car. I'd just come from a doctor's appointment. I'd been diagnosed with early-stage cancer, treatable but serious, and I was driving around trying to process it, thinking about mortality and legacy and what really mattered." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "Are you okay?" "I am," Michael assured her. "Treatment went well. I'm cancer-free now, but that diagnosis changed my perspective. Made me think about Dorothy and her promise to pass it forward. Made me realize I'd been doing it in abstract ways, writing checks, sitting on boards, but not in the personal, meaningful way she'd helped me." "And then you saw me selling flowers," Sarah said softly. "And then I saw you," Michael confirmed. A young mother, clearly struggling but still trying. Not begging, not giving up, but selling flowers in the cold to feed her babies. It reminded me of myself holding that cardboard sign, desperate but not defeated. And I thought, this is my chance. This is how I honor Dorothy's memory and my own second chance at life. He smiled. "So thank you, Sarah, for letting me help you. For working so hard to make that help matter. For proving that what Dorothy believed, that people just need opportunity, not judgment, was true." 5 years after that cold day, Sarah was a full-fledged registered nurse, running the medical clinic at Preston Holdings. Emma and Ethan were in kindergarten, reading above grade level, showing no signs of the trauma that might have marked children who'd spent their earliest months in poverty. But Sarah never forgot. She volunteered at homeless shelters, using her nursing skills to provide health care to people experiencing the kind of desperation she'd once known. She spoke at community colleges, sharing her story with other single mothers trying to balance school and parenting. She contributed to scholarship funds and childcare initiatives. And when she saw people struggling, truly saw them, the way Michael had seen her, she helped. Not with grand gestures usually, but with the kind of practical assistance that actually changed lives. Connections to resources, information about programs, sometimes just the acknowledgement that they were trying, that their efforts mattered, that they deserved support rather than judgment. "I'm passing it forward," she told Michael when he noticed her growing advocacy work. "Like Dorothy asked you to do. Like you did for me. You're doing more than that," Michael observed. "You're using your lived experience to help in ways I never could. You understand what it's like to be judged while selling flowers in the cold. That's powerful." 10 years after that cold March day, Sarah stood at an intersection. Downtown, the same intersection, where she'd once sold flowers. But this time she wasn't selling anything. She was distributing information about a new program she'd helped develop through Preston Holdings. Comprehensive support for single parents, subsidized childcare, job training, tuition assistance, healthcare, and mentorship. A young woman approached hesitantly, a toddler on her hip, her clothes worn and her eyes tired. "Is this real?" she asked, looking at the flyer Sarah had handed her. "Or is it one of those things where they promise help, but there are so many requirements you can never actually qualify?" "It's real," Sarah promised. "I know because I've been where you are. 10 years ago, I was standing on this exact corner, selling flowers with my twin babies strapped to my chest, freezing and desperate and out of options. Someone helped me. And now I help others. That's how it works." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can do this. Go back to school, work, be a good mom. It feels impossible." "It is impossible to do alone," Sarah agreed. "That's why you're not going to do it alone. You're going to let us help you, the way someone helped me. And someday, when you're on your feet, you'll help someone else. That's the promise I'm asking you to make. Not to pay me back, but to pay it forward." "I promise," the woman whispered. Sarah gave her a hug, careful of the toddler between them, and thought about Michael and Dorothy and the chain of kindness that connected them all. One person helping another who helped another, creating ripples of change that spread farther than any single person could imagine. That evening, Sarah returned home to her small house. Not fancy, but safe and warm and filled with the sounds of her. Children doing homework and arguing about whose turn it was to set the table. Emma was 10 now, already talking about becoming a doctor. Ethan wanted to be a teacher. Both of them had grown up, hearing the story of the cold day when a billionaire stopped his car and changed their lives. "Mom," Emma said over dinner, "there's a kid in my class whose family is really struggling. Her dad lost his job and they might lose their house. Can we help them? Sarah,